Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
No longer just a campaign promise, the legal foundations will be laid today for Donald Trump's controversial border wall with Mexico. He'll be signing the executive order to make it a reality. The new president's also said to be considering some even more drastic steps, including barring all immigration from certain countries, reversing plans to close Guantanamo Bay, and even revoking a ban on the use of torture. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore has the latest.
Donald Trump has already signed a series of controversial executive orders.
Okay.
But none as symbolic as his next presidential step, authorizing the funding for the construction of the wall along the Mexican border.
Are you ready?
It was the great populist theme of the campaign.
We will build a great wall along the southern border.
Electrifying his crowds.
And who's going to pay for that wall?
Becoming the signature promise of his bid for the White House.
We're going to have the wall. We're going to have the wall.
The current barrier is a mix of wall and fencing that stretches a few hundred miles. Trump is planning to extend it along the entire 2,000-mile border, and today insisted Mexico would indeed pay for it.
We will be, in a form, reimbursed by Mexico, which I've always said.
So they'll pay us back?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Mexico that way, US of A that way.
But border agents have told me that the tunnels used by migrants and drug couriers that we saw ourselves this summer will always frustrate their efforts to seal the frontier. Even a high wall can often be climbed. Just look at these drug smugglers effortlessly scaling it. There is also an imminent executive order that will block the arrival of refugees from countries like Syria and Iraq. Immigration activists call that a shocking message to the world.
I think President Trump's executive orders are an assault on the American dream, our values, and our culture as a nation.
In addition, the White House has just issued a draft proposal to reopen the CIA's black sites, those covert interrogation centers used to hold Islamic militants. In the past, it was in these locations that waterboarding was used, a technique Trump has long championed.
Then they said to me, what do you think of waterboarding? I said, I think it's great, but I don't think we go far enough. And the whole place, it's true. It's true.
But some are warning that reviving that would be disastrous and illegal.
Any military leader you respect have said we should not torture people, and I'm very confident that it wouldn't stand a day in court if they tried to restore that.
It also seems certain that the prison at Guantanamo Bay will now remain open indefinitely. Trump is making clear that in national security, as in trade and immigration, America is now heading in a new direction.
So, Robert, how much opposition will the new president face then to these proposals?
Well, of course, Mary, there's going to be intensive opposition on multiple fronts. Look, just take the wall, for example. I mean, forget the politics of it. There are going to be serious sort of technical and financial questions about it. Mexico won't pay for the wall, despite what Donald Trump says. And certainly Congress here doesn't want to take ownership of a $20 billion project that probably would prove ineffective in any case. Now, on that waterboarding and on the opening up potentially of CIA black sites, look, it's just a draft proposal in any case, and as John McCain says, it almost certainly wouldn't survive a legal challenge. Look, for many Americans and certainly for US allies overseas, it does hint at America sort of changing its moral character. It sort of alludes to a fortress America, to this country kind of pulling up the drawbridge. And the point is, we haven't yet got to the most controversial proposals of all. For example, the deportation of millions of undocumented workers. That might be the most polarizing issue that we've yet had.
Robert Moore in Washington, thank you. And if you go to our Facebook page shortly, Robert will be taking your questions about President Trump's latest announcements. Here, the Prime Minister's confirmed to the House of Commons that she will be meeting President Trump in Washington on Friday, the first foreign leader to do so since his inauguration. Well, that was expected. But then Theresa May surprised many MPs by announcing her government will publish a so-called white paper detailing its plans for Brexit, something Number 10 had been resisting. Here's our political correspondent, Libby Wiener.
Defeated in the courts, Theresa May was facing another potential defeat in the Commons.
Are you worried about defeat, Prime Minister?
Pro-Remain MPs demanding she produce a white paper on her Brexit plans. Her solution, give them what they wanted.
I set out that bold plan for a global Britain last week, and I recognise there is an appetite in this House to see that plan set out in a white paper, and I can confirm to the House that our plan will be set out in a white paper published in this House.
It completely wrong-footed the Labour leader.
The Prime Minister has wasted 80 days between the time of the original judgment and the appeal. Could we know when this white paper is going to be available to us?
Awkward, certainly, but the Prime Minister wasn't finished.
He's the leader of the party. He can't even agree with his shadow chancellor about Brexit. The shadow chancellor can't agree with the shadow Brexit secretary. He talks about us standing up for Britain. They can't speak for themselves. They'll never speak for Britain.
Following the Supreme Court ruling, the government will now publish a bill tomorrow on triggering Article 50. There'll be a white paper on its Brexit aims in due course, though not necessarily before MPs debate and vote on the Article 50 bill next week. The aim is still to get approval from both houses of Parliament by the end of March. The concession over a white paper was welcomed by some.
It means as MPs we can now debate how the negotiations are going to go, what we want from a Brexit deal on behalf of all of our constituents, and especially those who feel they voted Remain and that they've been a bit put to the side.
But pro-Remain Labour MPs were less impressed.
The white paper won't make a huge amount of difference.
It might make a bit of a difference, but in the end, if it's the hard Brexit that Theresa May says she wants, and failing that, falling back on WTO rules, that is calamitous for our country's economy, and I don't think anyone in their right mind should support it.
But after yesterday's bruising court ruling, any serious upset in the Commons now looks unlikely.
OK, so Libby, explain then. How much difference does the Prime Minister's pledge to publish this white paper really make?
Well, tactically, it's been very effective. You saw how uncomfortable the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, was when she surprised him by announcing that, after all, she was going to produce a white paper. And she does seem to have bought off some potential Tory rebels. How much more we'll learn about her plans for Brexit, I'm not sure. Her spokeswoman was saying that effectively it will be a reworking of her speech last week. But some MPs I've spoken to do think it'll be an important benchmark by which they'll be able to judge the government's actions by. And I did detect a difference in Theresa May's approach. She does seem to be more comfortable with the idea of parliamentary scrutiny now, despite that Supreme Court defeat yesterday, which had forced her to come to Parliament. She does seem more comfortable with the whole idea of it.
OK, thanks, Libby. But on another matter, there was an embarrassing gaffe, wasn't there, from Jeremy Corbyn today at Prime Minister's Questions. Tell us about it.
Yes, well, it was at the start of Prime Minister's Questions when the Leader of the Opposition began to express his condolences for a soldier whom he said, a policeman rather, whom he said had lost his life in a shooting incident in Northern Ireland at the weekend. Now, the police officer he referred to was injured very badly, but he wasn't in fact killed. The Police Federation of Northern Ireland have said it was a shocking error and have demanded an apology. His spokesman did effectively offer an apology, saying that no offence was intended. Well, that's as maybe, but I think it was very unfortunate.
OK, Libby Wiener at Westminster, thank you.
Now, the day's other main story here. President Trump is signing more executive orders. He says today is his big day on security. He's confirmed that he's taking action on one of his most prominent campaign promises to build a wall along the US border with Mexico. And tonight, Mr. Trump said he expected construction to start within months and that planning was already underway. Our correspondent James Cook reports from the US border with Mexico.
Donald Trump's signature pledge is now one step closer to reality. With a stroke of his pen, the new president ordered the construction of a great wall on the Mexican border. It would begin, he said, within months.
A nation without borders is not a nation. Beginning today, the United States of America gets back control of its borders. We are going to get the bad ones out, the criminals and the drug deals and gangs and gang members and cartel leaders. The day is over when they can stay in our country and wreak havoc.
Strengthening and extending the existing barrier on this frontier will be hugely expensive. Mr. Trump has always insisted that Mexico will pay, but Mexico says it won't, and the president now admits American taxpayers will have to cough up first.
Ultimately, it'll come out of what's happening with Mexico. We're going to be starting those negotiations relatively soon, and we will be, in a form, reimbursed by Mexico, which I've always said.
So they'll pay us back?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So the American taxpayer will pay for the wall at first?
All it is we'll be reimbursed at a later date.
But here in the Mexican border city of Tijuana, business leaders are worried about the impact on trade and skeptical about the president's plans.
The problem is that the majority of Americans are not really familiar with the border. And consequently, the idea of a wall seems to be appealing. We already have one. We call it the tortilla curtain. But the truth of the matter is that, I think that's a symbol.
Well, this fence at the Pacific Ocean is the very start of the land border between Mexico and the United States. And President Trump has always said that he wants to build a much taller, much better, much bigger wall, stretching all the way from here, nearly 2,000 miles, to Texas.
This land is your land. This land is my land.
But even in liberal California, there's backing for President Trump's hard line on immigration, not least from these supporters who call themselves the Trumpettes.
I think it's a good thing. I always say my scripture is Ezekiel 22:30. I sought for a man who would build a wall. And I was reading that the other day, and it just stuck out in my spirit because we need protection. And I pray for America, and I pray that God will shore up the border of our nation.
As well as the wall, President Trump is promising to deport immigrants who commit crimes, to cut funding to states like California, which refuse to arrest most illegal aliens, and to hire 10,000 more enforcement agents. His actions are bold, sweeping, and intensely divisive. James Cook, BBC News, on the US-Mexico border.
Well, let's talk about the day's events. Let's go live to the White House, and John Sopel is there, our North America editor. The President promised a big day on security, John, but it's gone way beyond that.
Yeah, it's gone way beyond that, Hugh, because he's been talking about much wider issues too, and talking about some enhanced interrogation techniques that may be appropriate to be used by the CIA when questioning terrorists in future. So he was asked in that interview, do you think that waterboarding works? And he said, I want to do everything within the bounds of what you're allowed to do legally, but do I feel it works? Absolutely, I feel it works. And he talked about the need to fight fire with fire. He said he would leave it to his defense secretary and CIA chief. Well, the CIA chief, Joe Pompeo, has been more sympathetic towards it. The defense secretary, not. He said, you know what would be more effective? Give me a packet of cigarettes and 2 bottles of beer, and the person I'm interrogating is likely to respond better to that. There's also a document circulating which looks like a draft executive order which talks about all those things that seem to belong to a different political era. Enhanced interrogation, waterboarding, black sites, all the things that were from the Bush era war on terror seem to be being considered again.
John, thanks very much. John Sopel there with the latest at the White House.
There will be a wall along the Mexican border with the planning work starting right now. And Donald Trump declared today Mexico will absolutely pay 100% of the cost. The new president promised a big day on security, and this was it. Full steam ahead with his campaign pledges to crack down on immigration, including restricting the number of refugees and hiring thousands more border police and customs agents. Live now to our Washington correspondent, Kylie Morris. Kylie.
John, amid this blitzkrieg of first-week executive orders today, the focus has turned to immigration, which was really much anticipated given the significance attached to the issue by Trump, the candidate, and those millions of Americans who voted for him. Trump, the president, has signed an executive order that we're told includes a diktat finally to build the wall. The president has given an interview to say that he expects construction to start within months and that planning is already underway. And as you say, he's reiterated that Mexico will pay for it, or at least reimburse whatever the US spends constructing it. Critics say that this is political theatre and simply won't achieve its aims. But the White House calls it a common sense first step to stem the flow of drugs, crime and illegal immigration. We are also expecting in the next days another order to ban temporarily refugees from a number of Muslim majority states, so a reversioning of the Muslim ban. President Trump has all the optics to say he's delivering on those big campaign promises. He's also ordered an investigation into his belief, absent of evidence, that between 3 and 5 million votes were fraudulently cast on election day. That, though, feels like a distraction from what is actually happening.
On day one, we will begin working on an impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall.
Not day one, but week one, and the president is signing his wall into life with an executive action. There's little hard detail, but Donald Trump plans to deliver for his supporters the semblance of action on a key campaign promise to stem illegal immigration by securing America's southern border with Mexico. And who's going to pay for it?
Ultimately, it'll come out of what's happening with Mexico. We're going to be starting those negotiations relatively soon, and we will be, in a form, reimbursed by Mexico.
Mexico's president said in recent days that Mexico absolutely will not pay, adding that it goes against our dignity as a country and our dignity as Mexicans. He says, quite simply, they're not paying.
David, I think he has to say that. He has to say that.
The gargantuan project the president envisages, estimated by the government to cost $12 billion, gives physical scale to his hardline immigration ideology.
Any wall or any block on a border doesn't prevent people from coming. All it means is that it's going to push people farther out into the desert, and it means more people are going to die.
Undeterred, the president is working his way through greatest hits of his campaign with his executive order program. Next on the list, remember this.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
That plan itself won't come to. Something similar is in the works. Most likely a temporary ban on resettling in the US refugees from a number of Muslim-majority countries, and the overall number of refugees taken in by the world's richest country will be reduced by more than half. As it stands, from October 2015 to September last year, under the Obama administration, the US admitted just shy of 85,000 refugees. Of those, 12,500 were from Syria, almost 10,000 from Iraq, and 3,750 from Iran. Nearly 40,000 of those resettled over that period are Muslim. And they will be the focus of the presidential order.
It's criminalizing an entire population based on their faith. And this goes against our Constitution, it goes against our values. He's focusing specifically on Muslim-majority countries, and he's focusing on people's nationalities, and this is very un-American, very unconstitutional.
For refugees and migrants from Muslim countries, from Central and South American nations, Fortress America is under construction and no longer open to the huddled masses. On the southern border, there'll be more detention centres and more punitive action against those who try to cross. Any cities that try to resist the immigration crackdown, known here as sanctuary cities, will lose their federal funding.
Kylie Morris reporting from Washington. Well, we're joined now from that city by Zainab Chowdhury from the Council of American Islamic Relations, and by Star Parker, a conservative columnist and founder of the Center of Urban Renewal. She's also in D.C. Zainab Chowdhury, these are 7 countries from which, of course, quite a number of war refugees might come into America. What do you make of this first executive order?
You know, we're deeply disturbed. Any kind of policy or executive order that unfairly discriminates or targets against any population, specifically based on religion or race or ethnicity or sexual orientation or what have you, is deeply antithetical to the values of our country. And not only that, but it also pits the Muslim world against the Western world, against the United States. It sends a message to the Muslim world that you are not, you're not welcome here. And I think especially in these countries that were targeted, the fact that many of these countries are seeing some of the worst humanitarian crises of our times is especially disturbing, because now we've essentially told them, or will be telling them, our government will be telling them that they're not welcome here.
Well, Star Parker, isn't there a danger that this may deepen divisions in America rather than heal them?
Well, perhaps, but what we hear is that most of the people in that region don't like Americans anyway. It's sort of like having a guest come into your home. They have to abide by the rules of your home. What Americans, I believe, are waiting for is a loud voice out of that region that actually says that something has gone terribly wrong. Why are they refugees in the first place? And instead, what we get is scrutiny of Israel, which most Americans believe is our dear friend.
Well, when one thinks of America,
I don't know where you're getting that information from. The idea.
Sorry, keep going. Yes, keep going.
No, I was just going to say the idea that many of the people in those countries don't like America, or they don't appreciate Western values. I'm not sure where that information is coming from. It's entirely subjective. I mean, I think that we also have to examine our own foreign policies and the fact that we've also invaded many of these countries, and we've also conducted drone strikes and indiscriminate drone strikes in many of these countries. I think that it's important to look at the data and the facts that we have. And the reality is that refugees and immigrants do not pose a threat to national security. The vast majority of reports indicate that refugees are.
But listen to the double talk in what you're saying right there. First, you're saying that we have attacked them, but now they want in this country and they're going to abide by our laws and our rules. I think Americans are saying, let's just pause. Let's pause because we're not sure. Keep in mind that the men that attacked us on September 11th, 9/11, were men that had dwelled with us for years. I think that Americans are tolerant enough. And what's happening now is we're hearing that you're too impatient.
Which, mind you, by the way, the country that many of those perpetrators were from Saudi Arabia. Many of those perpetrators were from Saudi Arabia.
Yes,
which,
that is
mind you, is not one
absolutely
of the
true. Why can't we focus policy on?
I think it's important. I think it's important to keep perspective. American Muslims suffered as much as Americans of diverse faiths on 9/11, and to use that as an excuse to push back against religious pluralism, to push back against some of the values and principles that are enshrined in our Constitution.
Can I just come in there? I just want to come in for a moment. Let me put it to you, Star Parker, that the worst atrocities ever committed on the American mainland were committed indeed by 15 Saudi terrorists. Saudi Arabia is not to be listed in this list of people that are going to be watched.
That's absolutely right.
Now,
I don't think it's about which country hit us.
I just wanted to add a further thing to the question. The question,
this
Star Parker, is that this is a country which is spreading Wahhabism across and radicalizing much of the immediate world around Pakistan and Bangladesh, and indeed in Afghanistan. Are they not a threat to America?
Well, what we know is that when Americans' friends are under attack at the UN, everybody that thinks that we should do something about that region channels their energy toward all of the others that are in disagreement with America. What Americans are now saying is we have a president who's saying, let's pause. Let's find out what is really broken down in that region and why people, especially the refugees, can't live in their own country. These are the problems we should solve, not try to integrate them into American culture, because America does have a defined culture.
Okay, Zainab Chaudhry.
Let's call a spade a spade. This executive order isn't about national security. It's not about protecting Americans. The vast majority of threats that are waged towards Americans are domestic in nature, and that's backed up by data and by evidence and by reports. This is about Islamophobia. This is about anti-Muslim bigotry, and the idea that we're perpetuating more animosity, we're perpetuating a us versus them dichotomy by these kind of policies and these kind of executive orders that are going to further alienate a segment of the world's population that can be one of the greatest allies in securing our nation and our interests abroad is really, I think, something that is
just
ties
say
back
what
to the
you
idea
said
of
is
cutting
true.
our
Let's
noses
just
off
say
our own
that.
face. And refugees, over 800,000 refugees have entered the United States since 2001, and of those, the vast majority of these are law-abiding citizens.
Just pause a moment. Let's hear from Star Parker.
Let's just say that it is true that our major threats are domestic. Let's just pretend that what you just said is true. Then that's all the more reason we should shut down and begin to process what is already in our country and try to find out who we are as a free country, and then we will open it up to our guests. What refugees are guests in our country.
Can you name one?
And the same way if you had chaos in your home,
can you name one terrorist attack that took place in the United States?
It's not about terrorism at this point. It's about.
Can you name one attack that was launched by refugees that entered the United States?
I'm sorry, it's very, very hard to do it all at once.
Contribute.
I think we've got the sense of what each of you stands for.
And
thank you very much indeed, Zainab Chowdhury, and thank you very much,
pause.
Star Parker. I'm afraid I'm still talking as you are, but thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, John. American president in Twitter war with national parks after public spat over size of inauguration crowd. It sounds like a headline from Private Eye. But like so much else in the world, according to Trump, it's true, or fact, not even alternative fact. But America's national parks have a mind of their own, and it seems the appropriately named Badlands in South Dakota have gone rogue. #Sadlands, as Donald Trump might say, or tweet. Here's our science editor, Tom Clark.
Badlands National Park, home to wild bison, rare fossils, striking scenery, and briefly, facts about climate change.
Burning 1 gallon of gasoline puts nearly 20 pounds of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. The pre-industrial concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was 280 parts per million. As of December 2016, 404.93 parts per million.
They were almost immediately taken down. But why, if they were factually correct? After moves this week by the Trump administration to silence federal agencies that deal with climate change, the tweets were seen as a deliberate act of defiance. The Park Service, a federal body itself, promptly apologised. But the episode speaks of a new mood hanging in the air.
The relentless resistance to Trump's regressive policies start today and will continue for the next 4 years.
They're worried about things like the money that pays for toxic waste cleanups like this spill on the Colorado River. The transition team at the Environmental Protection Agency has announced a temporary freeze on all contracts, grants and public statements. It says they're part of a normal transition. But former EPA officials we've spoken to say this has not happened previously and indicate new protections in the pipeline may now not happen. What's worried others are gagging orders, again temporary, on officials and scientists within environmental agencies.
I just want to make sure that all of those federal employees who have anything that they want to say to Congress, because there's some confusion now as to whether they can talk to us. I'm telling you, the law protects you, and I will do every single thing in my power to make sure you're protected. Call me. I want to talk to you.
The speed at which orders are flying out of the White House has left environmentalists in a state of panic. How justified, we just don't know yet. But the orders issued so far, from oil pipelines to the efficiency of boilers, are nearly an exact match for the lobbying wish list of the fossil fuel industry. They've been kept out of the White House for 8 years. Now they're back.
Tom Clark reporting now.
I've been getting